Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at this really interesting video essay that you sent in all about symbolism in Titanic. Now, I know you probably heard a million Titanic analyses,
Right.
but this one's different.
It is.
I think you'll agree with me. So we're not focusing on historical accuracy or anything like that. We are going deeper into the symbolism that's in the movie.
That's right. This deep dive is all about how the film uses things like color and wardrobe and even character actions to tell kind of a deeper story.
Yeah, like gender roles and personal journeys.
Yeah.
And you know those like archetypal character arcs.
Exactly. You're going to see Titanic in a whole new light after this.
Yeah.
So the video essayist starts off talking about color symbolism. They're saying that the colors worn by Jack and Rose and Cal throughout the film aren't just accidental.
Right.
They were deliberate choices packed with meaning.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is how these color choices often reflect the characters, like emotional states or their relationships. Like take Rose, for example. When we first meet her, she's draped in white and purple.
White often represents innocence and purity. And purple, can be associated with royalty.
Yeah, it's like she's pristine, right? This like untouched flower. But at the same time, she's trapped within those like rigid expectations of her class. Like she's going to be married off to some rich guy.
Right.
I mean, her mom's always like pushing her towards Cal and away from Jack.
Right. And speaking of her mother, remember how she's always wearing green? The video essayist suggests that green symbolizes wealth and ambition, but also potentially greed and even jealousy.
It's like she's living vicariously through Rose, right? Like pushing her toward a life that's just going to bring her, the mother, more social clout. I think the green's a really interesting choice, especially when you contrast it with Rose's initial innocence.
Exactly. It really highlights that conflict between Rose's genuine desires and like the materialistic ambitions of her family and her whole social circle. This theme of conflicting values is kind of woven throughout the film.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about that corset scene. I think that's a pretty powerful visual, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. That scene's so much more than just fashion, like the video essayist was arguing. It's like a literal and metaphorical representation of all the restrictions placed on Rose by her class and society.
Right. It's like she's being squeezed into this mold that doesn't really fit her true self. And that's a feeling that I think a lot of people, probably our listeners, can relate to in their own lives. Interestingly, though, as the film goes on and Rose falls deeper in love with Jack, her wardrobe starts to change. Her clothes become less restrictive and looser, more flowing.
Yeah, like she's shedding those constraints.
Yeah.
Kind of like a newfound sense of freedom and self-expression.
Right.
Do you think there's a connection between that visual transformation and like Rose's evolving relationship with Jack?
Oh, I think it's undeniable. The loosening of her clothes really mirrors her growing comfort with her desires and, her willingness to kind of break free from what's expected of her. It's a powerful visual metaphor for her internal transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Now, we can't forget about Jack.
Right.
The video essayist dives into his character as well and suggests that he kind of embodies this masculine imperative.
Right. So for those of you who maybe haven't heard that term before, the masculine imperative is that societal expectation that men should be protectors and providers. And Jack definitely fits that mold. He's constantly putting Rose's safety and well-being above his own.
You see it time and time again. He rescues her from different dangers physically and emotionally. He guides her, supports her, fights for her survival. But is there a downside to this unwavering heroism?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The video essayist made the argument that Jack, despite his good intentions, might actually be reinforcing those traditional gender roles by consistently assuming the role of the rescuer.
Yeah, because it kind of perpetuates the idea that women are inherently in need of saving. And Rose initially kind of embodies this feminine imperative, right? Where women are expected to prioritize preservation and safety. But eventually she breaks free from that.
It's like she's caught between these two opposing forces.
Yeah.
She's expected to be protected, but at the same time, she has this burning desire for freedom and agency.
Right.
And this struggle really comes to a head in that scene where she jumps back onto the sinking ship to be with Jack.
Right. It's both a testament to her love for him and like a defiant act. She chooses to face danger with him rather than seeking safety on her own. But it does raise the question, did her choice to be with him actually seal his fate? If she had stayed in the lifeboat, would he have had a better chance?
It's a question that really makes you think. about sacrifice, and the weight of our choices and those unintended consequences of defying expectations.
Absolutely.
It's clear that Rose's transformation is like a central theme of the film.
Right.
But do the other characters experience similar growth?
Well, the video essayist goes on to analyze all three members of that love triangle, Rose, Jack, and Cal. And they assign each of them a distinct character arc. So Rose, as we've discussed, has what's called a positive arc, meaning she undergoes significant growth and change. But Jack, he kind of stays the same throughout the whole film, right?
Right. He's always the hero. Selfless.
Yeah, the video essayist calls this a flat arc. While he doesn't necessarily change internally, his unwavering character really has a profound impact on those around him, especially Rose. He acts as this catalyst for her transformation, inspiring her to embrace her true self. So even though his character remains static, his influence is undeniable.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. He's that constant force pushing Rose towards growth.
Exactly. Now, how about Cal? He seems to be the villain in all of this. How does his arc fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Well, Cal, in contrast to both Rose and Jack, has what they call a negative arc.
Mm.
He starts off seemingly charming, although maybe a bit controlling, but as the movie progresses, he becomes more possessive, jealous, and even cruel.
Yeah. His obsession with wealth and status ultimately leads to his downfall. He loses Rose, he loses the necklace, and he's left with nothing but bitterness and resentment. It's a classic example of how clinging to those material possessions can lead to emptiness.
Absolutely. His negative arc serves as a cautionary tale, reminding viewers that true happiness lies in genuine connection and personal growth, not in external validation or material wealth.
hmm It's fascinating how these three contrasting character arcs kind of intertwine to create such a complex and emotionally resonant story.
Right. We have Rose, this blooming flower breaking free from her constraints, Jack, the unwavering force of nature inspiring change, and then Cal, the embodiment of a soul corrupted by greed and envy.
Yeah, it's like the film is presenting these three distinct paths with their own consequences. It's up to us, the viewers, to decide which path resonates with us most and what lessons we can take away.
It really makes you think. Now, let's not forget about that steamy drawing scene.
Oh,
It's a pivotal moment in Jack and Rose's relationship, and the video essayist offers a thought-provoking interpretation of it. This is where things shift toward female agency and consent.
It's interesting because despite Rose's sheltered upbringing, she's the one who initiates the encounter. She's not an object. She's an active participant making her own choices.
Exactly. She gives him specific instructions, expressing her desires openly. It's a really powerful statement about female empowerment. She's taking control of her sexuality and choosing to share this intimate moment with Jack on her terms. And this scene's especially striking when you contrast it with her interactions with Cal, who sees her more as a possession than a partner.
Yeah, it's like she's reclaiming her body and her desires, rejecting those expectations of her class, and embracing a more authentic version of herself.
Right.
That drawing scene's a pivotal moment in her journey towards self-discovery.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the heart-wrenching events of the sinking, I want to rewind a bit and talk about that first encounter between Rose and Jack. She's wearing that striking red dress with the black overlay.
Right.
That's a great example of the film using color to foreshadow events. Red, which is often associated with love and passion, is literally covered by black, which can symbolize grief and mourning.
It's like a visual premonition,
Yeah.
a hint at the tragic love story that's about to unfold.
Exactly. And there's still some red peeking through, which the video essayist connects to danger or catastrophe.
Right.
It's subtle but powerful foreshadowing.
It is.
And while we're talking about wardrobe, let's talk about Jack for a second. Remember when he first meets Rose, he's wearing that flannel coat. It kind of marks him as working class, visually separating him from the first-class passengers. But then, as he's getting ready to jump into the water after Rose, he takes off that coat, revealing a purple shirt underneath.
Right. And remember, we talked about how purple can symbolize royalty. It's almost like the film is contrasting Jack, the true prince, with Cal, the pretender prince.
Exactly.
Cal has the wealth and social standing, but he lacks the qualities of a true leader. Jack, despite his humble origins, embodies the spirit of nobility, his bravery, his selflessness, his devotion to Rose.
Right. It's a really clever visual metaphor that challenges those traditional ideas about class. The film seems to be saying that true worth comes from inner qualities, not external stuff. But it's not just clothing. Remember that scene where Cal's trying to buy Rose's affection back with the Heart of the Ocean necklace?
Oh, yeah. That scene is so telling.
It's like he's trying to purchase love with material possessions, which we see throughout the film is meaningless when it comes to genuine connection.
It really highlights the difference between Cal's transactional view of relationships and that genuine connection between Jack and Rose.
It does. And this theme of genuine connection versus superficiality is emphasized again in that scene where they're dancing at the third-class party. The video essayist suggests that this scene is a metaphor for Rose willingly submitting to Jack's lead.
Right, because in a dance, like in life, there's a natural balance between leading and following. By letting Jack lead, Rose is showing trust
Right.
and a willingness to, embrace a different way of being.
Exactly. It's a small but significant moment in their relationship, showing how they complement each other and move in sync, both literally and metaphorically. And don't forget, her outfit changes in this scene too. More pink starts to show through that black overlay.
Yes. It suggests that her love for Jack is growing stronger. The colors are speaking to us again. It's also interesting that in this scene, Jack blends in seamlessly with the third-class environment. He even makes fun of those wealthy passengers who are oblivious to his social critiques.
He's introducing Rose to a different world, a world where social class doesn't define worth and where joy and genuine connection can be found.
And she just seems to thrive in this environment. Remember when she does that ballet move after watching the men arm wrestle?
Absolutely. It's a display of strength and grace, challenging those traditional notions of what strength is. Power can manifest in many different forms.
And then, of course, there's that iconic I'm Flying Jack scene. Rose is wearing that same blue outfit she wore to church, but this time she's added a green shawl.
Oh, interesting. Blue, which is often associated with the Virgin Mary, could represent Rose's newfound spiritual awakening and sense of freedom. But the green, which we talked about earlier as symbolizing youth and inexperience, suggests she's still on a journey, still learning and growing.
And she literally has Jack supporting her in this scene. She's taking a leap of faith, embracing a new experience, but she knows she has his support.
It's a beautiful visual representation of their partnership and their journey together. They're navigating those uncharted waters as a team.
They are. And then their connection deepens even further in the car scene.
Right.
Rose and Jack are, well, consummating their love in a red car.
Red, of course, symbolizes passion and danger. The car itself could symbolize freedom and mobility. It represents their desire to escape those confines of their social class and chart their own course.
They're creating their own world, where love and passion are supreme, even with impending doom looming. And again, it's Rose who initiates this encounter, further emphasizing her agency.
Exactly. It's a culmination of her journey towards self-acceptance and liberation. It's a stark contrast to Cal's controlling behavior, further highlighting the huge gap between their views on love.
Yeah. This juxtaposition becomes even more apparent during the sinking, where we see the true nature of each character.
Right.
But before we get into those events, I want to pause for a second and reflect on a scene that I think often gets overlooked. The moment when Jack gets arrested after sneaking into first class. The video essayist points out something really interesting about his demeanor in that scene.
Yeah, they notice that he seems less confident, almost not himself. It's subtle, but it stands out.
It's like the disguise he's wearing is affecting his personality, making him feel out of place. But the essayist couldn't quite figure out why.
It's a mystery.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, maybe it's meant to highlight the inherent discomfort of pretending to be someone you're not. Or maybe it foreshadows his eventual sacrifice, like he has to shed his true self to save Rose. It's definitely something to think about.
It is. It's those little unexplained details that spark the best conversations. But speaking of intriguing details, let's fast forward to the moment when the ship hits the iceberg.
Right.
The video essayist digs into those masculine and feminine imperatives we were talking about earlier.
Right. They argue that Jack's immediate instinct is to protect Rose, while Rose hesitates for a moment, wondering if Jack stole the necklace when they were separated.
Right. It's just a tiny moment of doubt, but
Yeah.
it's significant.
Yeah. It suggests that even in the face of danger, Rose is still grappling with those societal expectations. She's questioning Jack's trustworthiness and falling back on that feminine imperative of self-preservation.
But she realizes pretty quickly that she was wrong to doubt him. She affirms her faith in him and her willingness to follow his lead.
Right. And this dynamic continues as the ship sinks. Jack takes charge, guiding Rose, making decisions, fighting for their survival. Rose trusts his judgment, relying on his strength and resourcefulness.
It's a classic example of traditional gender roles. The man as protector, the woman as the one being protected. But as we've seen, Titanic is way more nuanced than that.
Exactly. Remember, Rose also shows strength and agency. She helps break down that gate to free the third-class passengers. She refuses to give up hope, and she makes the choice to stay with Jack, even though it might cost her life.
She's not a damsel in distress. She's capable and resourceful, willing to fight for her life and the lives of others, and her decision to jump out of the lifeboat is like the ultimate defiance of that feminine imperative.
Right. She chooses love over safety, passion over convention. In doing so, she charts her own course, even if it leads to heartbreak.
And even though Jack sacrifices himself to save Rose, he makes sure that she'll live on. He encourages her to experience everything life has to offer.
It's bittersweet, but it also speaks to the power of love and sacrifice. His legacy lives on through her. She honors his memory by living a full and meaningful life. But before we talk about Rose's life after the sinking, I want to go back to the ship itself for a minute. The essayist briefly mentions the symbolism of the name Titanic.
Right, Titanic, the figure from Greek mythology representing power and rebellion. It's almost as if the ship's fate foreshadows the tragic consequences of hubris, of defying the natural order.
It's subtle but thought-provoking.
Yeah.
The name Titanic has this weight of inevitability, like a reminder that even the most powerful creations are vulnerable to nature and fate.
So the ship itself becomes a symbol for the fragility of life, the unpredictable nature of destiny and the consequences of pushing boundaries.
Exactly. And within this grand setting, we see all these individual stories unfold, each grappling with themes of love, loss, sacrifice, and the complexities of relationships. It's amazing how these grand themes are woven into such personal stories. Like, let's go back to Rose. There's this detail that I think a lot of people miss. It's a photo at the very end.
You mean the one where she's on the horse on the beach with the roller coaster?
Exactly. That photo is a direct callback to something she promised Jack. Remember when he was describing riding the roller coaster on the Santa Monica Pier?
Yeah, he made it sound so exciting. And Rose promised that she would ride it with him someday.
Right. And by putting that photo in there, the film's showing us that Rose, despite everything, went on to have a full and adventurous life. She lived out the dreams she shared with Jack.
Wow. Yeah. She didn't let that loss define her. She embraced life just like he told her to. That's really moving.
It is. It speaks to how strong their love was, a love that went beyond social barriers and even death. But what about the other characters, the ones who didn't make it?
Yeah, the video essay doesn't really focus on them, but it made me think, do you think there's a connection between how they lived and what ultimately happened to them?
That's a good question. It's tempting to say, like, Cal, who was so greedy, ended up losing everything.
Right, and Jack, who was so selfless, sacrificed himself for Rose. Almost like karma,
Yeah, I see what you mean. It emphasizes the film's message about genuine connection and how material things don't really matter. But even in the middle of all the tragedy, there are moments of hope and humanity.
Oh, totally. Remember that scene where the third-class passengers are stuck behind that gate? The essayist uses that to highlight how the film portrays gender roles in a crisis.
Oh, yeah. The men are trying to break it down, and Rose is using her words and her awareness to clear a path and help them out.
Exactly. It challenges that whole helpless woman stereotype. She actively contributes, showing she's resourceful.
It reminds us that in a crisis, different skills are important. It's not just about brute strength, but working together.
And it also shows how unfair those class differences were. The gates were literally blocking the third-class passengers from escaping.
It's like a visual representation of inequality.
Yeah.
The film doesn't hide the privilege of the upper class and how different that was from the resilience and community of the third-class passengers.
It's a powerful message, for sure. And speaking of social commentary, let's go back to that dance scene in third class. It's not just about them falling in love. It's about breaking social norms.
Right. She takes off her gloves before dancing.
Right.
Like she's shedding the rules of her upbringing.
And Jack, with his charm, guides her through it all, showing her the joy outside of her usual world.
It shows their shared journey toward freedom, both individually and as a couple. They're defying expectations and making their own path.
It's a timeless message. But their journey takes a turn, as we know. The sinking of the Titanic, this symbol of ambition and progress, becomes a reminder that life is fragile.
And in those last moments, the film's ideas about those masculine and feminine roles really come to a head. The essayist says that Rose jumping out of the lifeboat is her defying the idea that women should be saved no matter what.
Right. She chooses to be with Jack, even though it could mean death. She's rejecting that passive role.
She's choosing love over safety, passion over what's expected of her. She's making her own choice, even if it leads to heartbreak.
But as we talked about, it does raise a question. Did defying that expectation lead to Jack's death?
That's something that stays with you. Would he have lived if she stayed in the lifeboat? We can't know, but it adds another layer to the ending.
It reminds us that even the best intentions can have consequences, and that going against the grain isn't always easy.
And then you see Cal acting so selfishly during the sinking. He shoves a woman away from a lifeboat, even grabs a kid to save himself.
Right.
It's like showing the different sides of people under pressure. Some choose kindness, others choose to save themselves.
And Rose looks over at this woman who is alone,
Yeah.
like maybe foreshadowing.
Yeah, like only one of them will make it, representing different choices. And in the end, it's Rose who survives, but she carries the weight of Jack's sacrifice.
But she doesn't just survive, she lives a full life. Jack told her she would have a future, and she does. Children, grandchildren, even taking his name to honor him.
And all those photos at the end show more than just a good life. They show how much he influenced her.
Yeah, he might be gone, but his spirit is with her, pushing her to live. Their love story continues in a way. And speaking of that last scene where old Rose goes back to the Titanic in her mind and drops the necklace back into the ocean, it's so powerful.
It's like she's closing a chapter, letting go of the past and reuniting with Jack.
And she's wearing white, which means purity and peace.
It's such a beautiful ending to a movie that people still love. But before we wrap this up, what did you think of how the essayist talked about the character arcs?
Oh, it was really insightful.
Mm.
It's interesting how they tied Rose's journey to that positive arc. She grows so much throughout the film.
Right. And then there's Jack with the flat arc. He stays the same, but he changes everyone around him.
And then Cal, going down a dark path. It's like a warning about what happens when you value the wrong things.
It's like we're given 3 options, and we have to decide what we take from each.
This deep dive has been an emotional roller coaster.
It has.
From the ship to the relationships, there's so much to think about.
It's crazy how much depth and symbolism there is.
But before we end this, I have one last thing. Remember that scene with Jack's drawings?
Yeah, when Rose is looking through them, it shows us his soul.
Well, there's one of a woman with a heart-shaped pendant that looks a lot like the heart of the ocean.
Oh, yeah. I didn't notice that.
What if that means Jack was connected to the necklace or even the Titanic in a past life?
That's a cool idea. Like, there's some deeper connection between them and the ship.
It makes you wonder. So next time you watch Titanic, look for that drawing. Maybe it'll give you a whole new understanding.
Maybe it'll make you want to do your own deep dive.
Yeah.
You never know what you'll find.
That's true. So until next time, happy watching. And remember, there's always more to see. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about all those different connections, right?
Yeah.
But we still have so much to talk about with the symbolism in this film.
Right. Like all the layers of meaning.
Mm-hmm. Like, remember how we were talking about Rose's transformation
Mm.
and how she kind of defied those societal expectations?
Yeah.
Well, the essayist makes a really interesting point about that scene where Rose is getting ready for dinner with Cal. You know, she's being dressed by her maid, and it's all very elaborate.
Yeah, like a ritual. Like she's being prepared for a sacrifice,
Yeah. It's as if she's being presented on this altar of wealth and social standing. The
Mhm.
corset, the jewelry, the hair. It's all very deliberate.
Mhm.
It shows how much pressure she's under to conform. But of course, she ends up rejecting that path. She chooses love and being true to herself over all the riches.
Right. And you can really see that shift when you compare it to the scene where she's getting ready for the third-class party.
Oh, yeah. She's way more relaxed there, like having fun with it.
She picks out a simpler dress, does her own hair, even puts on her makeup differently. It's like she's free.
It's like she's shedding that old persona and becoming who she really is,
Yeah.
not playing a part anymore.
And she's wearing green in that scene, which is interesting.
Oh, right. Because we talk about how green is connected to her mother and all those materialistic goals.
Exactly. But here, it feels different.
Yeah. Like she's taking back that color, making it her own. It represents something new. It's really subtle, but I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. But let's not forget about Jack. I thought it was interesting how the video essayist talked about all the different archetypes he represents.
Right. It's not just the hero. There's more to him.
They said he's also the trickster and the artist.
So he's brave, but he's also mischievous and creative. That's a cool way to think about it.
It is. He's like this symbol of potential, encouraging everyone around him to be themselves.
And his drawings really show that, don't they? Like he can see beyond the surface and capture something real.
Mm-hmm. They're not just pictures, they're a part of him. They show how sensitive and compassionate he is.
And it's his art that brings him and Rose together in the first place.
It sparks her interest, opens her up to a whole new way of looking at things.
It's a good reminder that art can do that, you know? It can connect people and
Hmm.
make you see the world differently.
It's powerful.
It is. But of course, the story doesn't end happily ever after. The sinking really forces them to face the reality of death, and those themes of sacrifice and love really come through.
Definitely. Like when Jack gives Rose his place on the floating door. It's the ultimate act of love.
It is. And Rose choosing to live, to keep his memory alive, shows how strong she is.
They may not have gotten their happy ending, but their story still inspires people, reminding us about love and the human spirit.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm kind of amazed by how much we found hidden in this movie.
Right.
There's so much meaning packed into what seems like a simple love story.
That's the cool thing about art. You can always find something new. It makes you think and question things.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening, go back and watch Titanic again. Look for all those details, the colors, the clothes, the choices the characters make.
You might be surprised by what you see.
And maybe you'll be inspired to do your own deep dive into your favorite films. Until next time, happy watching.